Did Noah's Ark exist? Or was it just a story in the Bible? Well, we're about to meet someone who says not only that it exists, but that he has discovered it. Let's explore that region between things visible and invisible. Known as the Maverick Archaeologist, Dr. Aaron Judkins is a senior fellow with the Biblical Institute of Anthropology, but he is also an author and film producer known for the documentary film Finding Noah. As well as searching for Noah's Ark, other projects he's been involved in include excavations at the Pool of Siloam in Jerusalem, the discovery of the Dead Sea Scroll Cave 12 at Qumran, and many others besides. And he joins me down the line from his home in Texas. Aaron, welcome to Things Visible and Invisible.
Hi, it's an honor to be on the show with you today.
Aaron, let's begin at the beginning, in the book of Genesis, okay? There's a lot of people watching this who don't believe anything in the book of Genesis and don't really believe that Noah's Ark ever existed. Let's start with that. Why would anybody want to search for something which was perhaps a story, a good story, but just that?
That's a great question. I appreciate it. You know, there's been, in the archaeological record, which is where my forte is, there is a lot of information that is verified in both the Old Testament and the New Testament in the scriptures, within Israel and outside the land of the Bible. So, for instance, let's go back to Cave 12 that you mentioned in Qumran, Israel. This is where the corpus of the Dead Sea Scrolls existed or were created and then hid in the caves there in the northern En-Gedi. There's hundreds of caves there, but in 1947, two young Bedouin shepherds herding their goats, they lost track of one. They thought it went up in an alcove. And so the young shepherd boys, one of them took a rock and kind of threw it up in there. He heard the sound of cracking pottery. He wiggled his way through the hole, pulled himself through, and when his eyes adjusted, he noticed a pottery jar that's about knee high with a lid on it. And he took it off and discovered a scroll. Now, to a young Bedouin, a scroll's not valuable or important, but a jar is. So he left the scroll and took the jar. That ended up being the discovery of Cave 4 of the corpus of the Dead Sea Scrolls. This is where the majority of the scrolls came from in Cave 4, but caves 1 through 11 were discovered that housed what we know of today as the Dead Sea Scrolls. And what's important about that is that the Dead Sea Scrolls, every book in the Old Testament was verified, with the exception of one, that's the book of Esther. But every book and multiple copies of Genesis, Exodus, Psalms, Deuteronomy, Isaiah were found intact. The Great Isaiah Scroll is called that because it was completely intact. A lot of them were fragmented, but the Isaiah Scroll was completely intact. And you have to understand, this is before Christianity. So the people who wrote the scrolls there at Qumran, they were called the Essenes. And the Essenes were not Christians. This is before Christianity. And they had a scribal area in Qumran where they copied these scrolls. And they're the oldest text that we have that dates back as close as we can to the original. We don't have the originals anymore. But what this does is it vetted not just every book of the Old Testament, with the exception of one, but it verified the veracity of the Old Testament scriptures. Why? Is because those scrolls were written by non-Christian, a Jewish segment of group called the Essenes. But the scrolls actually verified our scriptures today because we could compare the text. And so if we go back to the Old Hebrew and we look at it, within about 3 to 5%, there's variations. Why is there variations? It's not because of errors. It's because of transliteration issues from the Hebrew into English. And so we have a transliteration issue, but the majority of the text, which is greater than 97%, is word for word in your scripture today, in the Bible today, which means that it closed that gap with the oldest known text that we have, which was the Aleppo Codex, dating to about 1,000 years. The Dead Sea Scrolls pushes that back in time a further 1,000 years. So now within the time frame from the time of Christ, the generation of Christ. This is what the Dead Sea Scrolls has vetted for us in archaeology. So when you find anything with writing on it, that's pretty much a gold standard, because that can really fill in the gaps about who and where and why, fills in the color. So the reason I answered that is because why is it important about Genesis? If the Dead Sea Scrolls confirm the Old Testament scripture, then in addition to the other archaeological finds that have been found throughout Israel and outside the land of the Bible that has been verified by archaeologists of people, places, names, dates, events, battles, etc., then we have to consider that Noah's Ark in Genesis is actually not mythology or fable, but it's actually a true account.
Okay, that's a fascinating place to start, Aaron. I'd just like to, before we move into your particular researches that you've done in this area, would you say that the mainstream archaeology has had a prejudice against anything to do with the Bible? Because certainly in my growing up, there was this idea that there was archaeology on one side and there was the Bible on the other side, and the two would never meet. Would you say that that is a sort of inherent, or has been an inherent prejudice within the archaeological establishment?
That is correct. Why? Because most secular archaeologists will not go beyond the material, what they can see, hear, feel, touch. These are things that are required for empirical evidence, but it leaves out a very critical piece of the information when you're looking at it through the framework of the Old Testament. It leaves that part out. So, for instance, archaeologists said for a long time that the existence of the Hittites never existed. Absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. Just because they didn't locate any evidence of the Hittites at that time didn't mean that the Hittites didn't exist. It was actually later that they discovered the evidence for the Hittite culture existing. And now we have ample evidence of the Hittites. When I was in Ankara, Turkey, they have a wonderful museum there. It's the capital of Turkey. And they have a wonderful museum, and a lot of the displays they have are Hittite artifacts. So there is a presupposition, if you will, that we all have. I have a presupposition. So we have to acknowledge the presupposition, but to totally exclude that anything related to the Bible is not historical fact is just wrong, because it has been verified throughout over the last say 150 years. It's been artifacts that's come out of the ground. that have verified, like I said, events, dates, people, etc. And so when you consider the preponderance of evidence, the empirical evidence that's coming out of the ground, then you have to acknowledge that these events, these people, these stones that are coming out of the ground have actually independently verified that the narrative in the Old Testament actually indeed is a historical account. So this is why a lot of the archaeologists won't consider this evidence, is because it's outside of their paradigm, and they don't want to go beyond it. One, because probably of a personal belief, or two, it could be an academic posture that they have to maintain. I know a lot of or several people in the field who have had pressure on them to either back off or recant their information, or if they didn't, they would have their careers crushed and they would be blacklisted. That has actually happened to archaeologists. So there's a paradigm that we have to acknowledge that sometimes is with outside of our comfort zone. But if the information is there, we have to acknowledge it.
Aaron, you style yourself as the Maverick Archaeologist. Is this the element of maverick in your quest, that you are going to places that other archaeologists won't go or fear to go?
Yeah, great question. You know, being independent like I am, I'm free from the from the do's and don'ts of academia. What I can research, what I believe, where I can go, what I can do. I'm not held within a constraint to do that. So because I'm independent, it allows me to go research things that perhaps another archaeologist won't go research, such as Noah's Ark. Why? Because they don't even believe it in the first place. But when you consider that there's hundreds of ubiquitous flood legends around the earth that are connected culturally, they may have a different Noah and a different kind of boat, and the story may be a little different, but there's a thread, a grain of truth that connects all those cultures around the globe. And that is, indeed, there was a global flood that happened on this earth. So I like to go research these things because a lot of archaeologists won't go. Matter of fact, I was asked when we produced the film Finding Noah. It was a theatrical release that went out in theaters here in the States back in 2015. It was the largest documentary release in theaters at that time. It won several awards. Narrated by the American actor Gary Sinise. And but someone asked me, why would you go and search for something like this? And the answer is because if we don't go, we won't know. We really have to, someone has to take up the challenge to be able to go and look for this. And if we have sightings in antiquity, such as Marco Polo and others, and then modern sightings, such as American Apollo astronaut Jim Irwin, who walked on the moon, who spent the rest of his life after he retired from NASA and the military searching and climbing Mount Ararat in eastern Turkey 9 times, nearly losing his life on one of those excursions on the mountain. He nearly died. But he took about 9 he climbed the mountain about 9 times. Why? Because he said he flew over a superstructure when he was flying aircraft in the military over there, and he wanted to see what that was. He was convinced it was Noah's Ark. So someone has to take up the challenge to go see what people are actually witnessing there, and that's part of the adventure, is a group of intrepid explorers stepping out of their normal everyday lives to put their lives at risk to go search for something such as Noah's Ark.
It's fascinating the way you put it, that it's so exciting to think of going on a quest, and such a quest as this. However, before we get into your adventure, your quest, which I'm really interested in hearing about, Aaron, you alluded to something there, which is true, that the quest for Noah's Ark is not new. It did not start with Aaron Judkins. It had been going on for some time. But am I right in thinking that in the last maybe 50, 60 years, there's been a sort of acceleration of serious interest from archaeologists and others to try and find Noah's Ark?
Well, there has been. Um, the search didn't start with me. It started with others a long time ago. But really, uh, the the team that I was on really goes back to the 1960s by a couple by the name of uh, uh, the Earl and Violet Cummings, and they were great Ark researchers, and they had amassed a large amount of data uh, on these sightings on Greater Ararat. And then when they got old in life, they could not go anymore. They passed that information on to Jim Irwin. And then after Jim Irwin, right before he died, he passed on all his information on to Richard Bright. And that's the team that I was with Richard Bright's team. And Richard has been spending about 30 years of his life or more searching for the Ark. He's made multiple climbs and put his life at risk, almost dying as well on the summit. Uh, but it takes someone to go up there and actually look. It's not just a mountain. It's a glacier capped mountain. It's one of the largest land masses in this area. It's for about 400 square miles. But once you get up past about 15,000 or so feet, you start getting into glaciers, multiple glaciers. So you have to have the ability to go up there and look under the ice, and you have to have a lot of equipment and a lot of scientific equipment to be able to do things like this. But um, it's worthy because the credibility of people like Colonel Jim Irwin, who has staked their reputation on seeing a superstructure on Mount Ararat, is a worthy effort. So again, I think uh, it's worth the search. And look, it's a difficult area to search. It's not easy. It's a 17,000 feet, one, the mountain. Two, it's a very sensitive geopolitical area. There's tensions between the Turkish military and the government and the Kurdish people. Matter of fact, when we was on the summit there in 20, we actually climbed in 2013. That truce broke and the conflict restarted again. So and of course there's other dangers, but ice crevasses, etc. So there's a lot of things to consider, but I think it's a worthy challenge.
Yeah. I mean, one of the questions that comes to mind, Aaron, is how do you end up on a team like that? I mean, it must be for certain archaeologists, it must be the dream job to be going to Turkey to search for the Noah's Ark. I mean, how did you sort of get handpicked to join that squad heading to Turkey?
Well, my colleagues had been researching this for a number of years. They invited me years before, but because I'm independent, which means I'm not funded, and at the time I was working full time in the medical field as well, and so uh, reasons are usually either time or finances. And so at the time I wasn't able to go. It takes I was in Eastern Turkey for almost um, well, probably just under 2 months. So it's a great sacrifice when you take up challenges like this to go on these major expeditions. So I wasn't able to go back in 2009, but it did present an opportunity for me in 2013, and so I was able to go. It's sometimes you just have to say yes and then figure out the rest, and that's kind of where I was at. I just said yes, I'll go. I'm ready, able, and willing. Exactly how I was going to get there and spend 2 months, and that I didn't know exactly how. So because I'm self-financed, I don't have just people that I can or an institution that will fund me. So I've done a lot of this out of pocket, which is a constraint because it limits my ability to go and do. But as I can and as I'm able to, I'm able to, I'm willing to do it. So that's part of the journey that I've been on all these years, is to take up opportunities when they present themselves, to go on these excursions, and that's sent me all over the world.
There are people watching this, Aaron, who are going to be skeptical about Noah's Ark and a quest for Noah's Ark, not believing perhaps that it exists. So what hard archaeological evidence would you present to them to help them to understand that there is archaeological evidence to suggest that Noah's Ark did indeed exist?
Well, that's part of the search. That's part of the journey that we're on now. We don't have hard evidence, empirical evidence to say we have discovered Noah's Ark. I know there are people that have made claims that they have already found the Ark. It's called the Derupinar site. I don't happen to agree with that location being Noah's Ark, and I have reasons for that. But if you look at the circumstantial evidence that surrounds uh, the story of Noah's Ark, such as the ubiquitous flood legends around hundreds of cultures around the globe. If you look at,
Well, just on that, Aaron, take people through that, because it's something which a lot of people aren't aware of, that just how, as you say, ubiquitous are these accounts of the floods in ancient times. Just take us through a few examples of that.
well, here in the States, the Native Americans believe in the flood legends. Now, every story is different. Let's go back to the Babylonians. They had a flood um, recorded on one of their ancient tablets called the Epic of Gilgamesh, and it basically recounts a Babylonian um, retelling of of their story of Noah's flood. Now it differs because the story by that time has changed quite a bit, but that's probably the oldest record that we have, even though it's not accurate. But the thread of the story is that there was a global deluge, and that a very limited number of people, of humans, actually survived. Everything else was wiped out and destroyed in the flood. Um, we have when I was in Peru, we have the ancient cultures there in South and Central America both have flood legends. So I detail all this in my journal, The Quest for Noah's Ark. You can find that at aaronjudkins.com. That's my website, aaronjudkins.com. And I detail and list all these in the journal there. But another piece of evidence that I would point you to is the geology around the Earth. Now, the geology around the Earth is interpreted in long ages, but when you look at the layers, such as the Grand Canyon here in the States, the Grand Canyon is missing 9 of those layers that are in textbooks. So those layers don't even exist. And it's in the Grand Canyon. This is real data. And then some of the layers have no evidence of eons of time between them. There's one layer stacked on another layer, but there's no evidence of time in between those layers. So the Grand Canyon produces some geological evidence that we can look at because it is down in the Earth's crust, and we can see those layers. And then we have sedimentary rock like limestone that runs from here in Texas, where we're famous, here where I live, famous for the dinosaur tracks, the fossilized dinosaur tracks in the riverbed, because the riverbed is limestone. But that limestone layer runs all the way around the Earth, including all the way to the White Cliffs of Dover in England, around through the Middle East, and all the way back around. That limestone layer is sedimentary, which means it's laid under water. It's a rock that is only laid down in a water context, and that's global. So when you look at the evidence, other evidence, we can look at dinosaurs and other things. Dinosaurs, I've excavated a lot of dinosaurs, and these dinosaurs were all buried underwater. They all drowned. A lot of the dinosaurs are buried in a death pose, which means they asphyxiated.
Mm-hmm.
So we see them in a death pose where they're arched backwards. Even fish in the fossil record, they're being suffocated, so they're arched backwards. Their necks are often broken or their backs are broken. And this was what we call the death pose. Not all of them are like that, but some are. And we see even the Gobi deserts of China, which is now desert, was all at one time underwater. So there's evidence of a global deluge around the Earth. I give these evidences on my Substack account at aaronjudkins.substack.com. And I write about a lot of these things in the articles that I produce, which you can go and look at. But there's a lot of evidence for a global deluge, and that all points back to the story back in Genesis of the global flood and Noah's Ark.
So yes, I mean, there's historical evidence, there's cultural evidence, and as you said, there's geological evidence that something happened, that a flood of some description happened upon the earth. But Noah's Ark is a very specific story within a very specific tradition, has obviously got great repercussions and meaning for Christians and for Jews. But the story of the Ark, the building of the Ark as a kind of saving of what was alive at the time, is there any evidence you've come across that seems to suggest that there's more to this than just a story? I mean, yes, there was a flood. Yes, something happened, but that the actual Ark itself, has there been any archaeological evidence or any fragment or something that you think this is pointing us towards a historical event?
Right. So there was a monastery on the northwest side of Greater Ararat back in the early 1800s. It was at about probably 7,000 feet. It was back when Armenia had the mountain within their territory. And in 1840, what we know is a Ahor Gorge. There was a big earthquake, and it blew out the northwest side of the mountain, creating the Ahor Gorge. It's deeper than the Grand Canyon on that side, but it completely buried that monastery and killed all those people. That monastery was said to have housed artifacts from Noah's Ark prior to 1840, but unfortunately, that's all buried under rubble today. We did find one church in Armenia that we went to that said to have some wood from Noah's Ark, and so we went and investigated that and looked at the wood. But there's some. It's an active research project, and one of the things that we want to find is verifiable data that that we can test, which means that we want to find wood, but the wood needs to be, we think, either a certain species of wood called gopher wood, or it's a technique or a process of how they built it with an interlamination process. We're not sure, but the Bible says it was pitched within and without with bitumen. That's tar. It's a natural waterproofing agent. And then we want to see how it was constructed, if there was wooden dowels, et cetera, how the joints were put together. There's been reports that the Chinese have made a discovery back in the early 2000s, but unfortunately, we can't independently verify or confirm these sightings. We're trying to actively now. There's video of them rappelling down into a structure. It looks to be old, but we can't trust our eyes on a video. We need to get our own researchers down into these areas to verify what this structure is. Others have said it's a hoax, and it was hoaxed intentionally. There's probably some reasons for that I won't get into here, but there's still an active research process going on here that we're trying to determine these things. They're open questions, and they're good questions, but this is the nature of research, and the nature of archaeology is to get archaeologists and geologists and people in their specialties to go and see if we can't confirm a superstructure on Ararat. So there's a lot of logistics and moving parts that go along with this, and we're hoping to find these answers, whether it's on the mountain or it's not on the mountain, or if it's discovered somewhere else. Personally, I think the existence of the Ark is there for us to find. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And I think that's whenever that happens, I think it'll be a major confirmation in archaeology. That will do a couple of things. It will verify the Old Testament account written in Genesis. Two, it will not only verify it in archaeology, but it will have to come to some kind of conclusion about what we believe. So for people like me who already believe it, I don't necessarily have to have Noah's Ark for any reason. It's not required. It's not a central part of my faith. To me, I love to go try to find this, but it's not a requirement. But look, if we find it, then it would be a verification that indeed this account had happened in history, and it's true and it's factual. Another part of that would be for people who don't believe, that may be on the fence, it may change their mind, and they may have to reconsider what they've believed in the past. And three, for people who already have their minds made up, it's not going to really matter to them. They're not going to believe it no matter what evidence you show them, even if it's Noah's Ark on the mountain in eastern Turkey. So those are the three possibilities, but I think it will serve when we do find it, and I think it's a matter of when. Again, there's a site called the Darupanar site that people claim that's Noah's Ark. It's about 30 miles away from Greater Ararat. I don't believe that that's Noah's Ark. It's a geological natural formation. But so I'm in the camp that is still on the mountain of Greater Ararat. But look, if we can't find it, it will come out and it'll be independently verified. And I think that's just a matter of time.
Mount Ararat seems to be the favored location for Noah's Ark. Has that always been the case, or are there other potential places, or do you think that is indeed where some sort of discovery will be found at some point?
I personally think it's still on Greater Ararat. There's alternative candidates that other researchers think are better possibility for the location. In other words, there's alternative Mount Ararats. The Bible says it gives an account in a plural. It says the mountains of Ararat. Now, when you're in eastern Turkey, there's only two mountains there. There's Greater Ararat, which is at 17,000 feet. And right next door, there's Lesser Ararat, which is at 14,000 feet. There are two peaks. That's it. There's no mountain range like the Rocky Mountains or anything. So the argument is, well, the Bible says the mountains of Ararat, but we only have two peaks over there, what they're called the Twin Peaks. So there's alternate locations for Mount Ararat. There's one in northern Iran, one in southern Turkey, about 200 miles away. There's another couple of alternative sites. I addressed this in a research article that I wrote called Finding the Mountains of Ararat. You can find it on academia.edu under that title, Finding the Mountains of Ararat, or just type in my name, Dr. Aaron Judkins. And I give reasons why those other sites I don't believe are the actual candidates. So I still think it's on Greater Ararat. Why? Because we have several areas we still need to rule out on that mountain. It's a very difficult challenge. No matter where you're at on the mountain, you have to deal with a lot of interesting factors, and some of them are quite dangerous. So I think it's a matter of if. I'm sorry. I think it's a matter of when we discover Noah's Ark, but I firmly believe it'll be on Greater Ararat.
When you're in those mountains and you're on your quest, is there a sense that you're in the right place?
Well, for us, when we were searching back in 2013, that came out in the film Finding Noah. It's not just a spot where I happen to say, I believe it, so we're just going to go there. That's not how that worked. We actually took a consensus of data that revolved around the ancient historical accounts and the modern day sightings. People like Ed Green, George Hagopian, who in 1943 was stationed there during World War II with the Army Corps of Engineers. And he was actually taken up to the Ark. Now, he was asked by some villagers who did not have water to the village. And so he was asked if he could get water to that particular village. The chief there was Abbas Abbas, and he did what any good engineer would do. He went up and found the obstruction. It was just a lot of boulders and rock, and he took some dynamite and blew it and created the water flow to the village. Well, this helped them out greatly, and to show their appreciation, the chief said, I want to take you up to see the Holy Ark, is how he termed it. And so he got a few days leave of absence, and they took him to a location to see the Ark. And we have his personal testimony that was recorded when he was an older man in his 80s. And we said, well, Ed, how did you know that was Noah's Ark? And he said, well, there wasn't a sign saying Noah's Ark, but he said it was a great structure. It was 3 levels. It had some windows at the top. It was kind of this huge barge. It was broken in 2. One section was here, one section was here. It was divided by some kind of a canyon. And he said we were going to go up and around to the top of it the next morning, but they got snowed out by a big snowstorm that hit them on the mountain. They were forced off the mountain for their personal safety. So we have his personal eyewitness account of what he saw, and we had an artist sketch what he saw, and it matches the construction of what's given in the Old Testament. So we take these different sightings of people that are separated by time and distance, by decades, from the early 1900s to the 1940s and beyond. The point is that they're separated by time and distance, so there's no connection or relation between any of these stories. And then so we took all the consensus of that data along with some other points using satellite technology, and we pinpointed an area on the mountain on the southeastern side of the slopes of Ararat. So there was reasons why we searched where we did, and this particular area was one of the greatest, I think, points of interest. but we also have other alternative sites on the mountain that are very difficult to get to. So this is the ongoing research process that we're involved with now.
One final question, Aaron. Is it feasible that after all this time that a structure, a wooden structure or any structure, could exist with such a span of history in between?
It's a great question. Let's go back to an example in Egypt where they buried a boat. They built a boat for the pharaoh, and they buried the boat. It was never used. They built it, and they took it and buried it in in the sands. And along with that was ropes that they would have used with the vessel. When they discovered the this ship, of course, when the pharaoh died, he was buried with everything. So this was part of his funeral burial material things that he would need in the afterlife. When they discovered this, not only was the wood intact, the rope was intact. I've been to Egypt and I saw this personally. You can go see it today still. The rope is like it was like it was just built and made yesterday. There's no deterioration to the rope. The same would be true with the wood on Ararat. If it's under the ice, it would be preserved because there would be a little exposure to the air and to oxygen, to bacteria, things that would cause that to break down, the wood to break down. So if it's under the ice, we would expect the wood to be preserved. This is true with other things that they have found with, say, wooden arrows in the icy regions of, say, Siberia or Alaska. These things can be intact. Why? Because it's preserved in those conditions. Now, once you bring those out, then you would have to take measures to preserve those things very rapidly, because once it gets exposed to the air, then it gets exposed to conditions that would cause it to break down. So we think that the wood, if it's preserved under the ice, would still be intact, or if it's buried underneath somehow, it would be preserved. So that and if it's still covered, if the wood's covered with bitumen, the tar, I think that would also preserve the wood because it's a waterproofing agent. So for those reasons, I think it would still be preserved today.
Fascinating. Dr. Aaron Judkins, tell people where they can find out more about you and your fascinating work.
Yeah, you can find my work at aaronjudkins.com. That's Aaron, AARON, JUDKINS, aaronjudkins.com. My latest book is called Decoding Göbekli Tepe, Biblical Anatolia and the Watchers. It's a brand new book. It just came out a few months ago. It was the #1 new release on Amazon in archaeology. This is the site in southeastern Turkey called Göbekli Tepe, which is considered the world's oldest temple in archaeology. So we're putting forth some new theories in the book about the possibility of a linguistic link on the stones at Göbekli Tepe and the symbols there. It's a very fascinating book, and we're really excited to get it out. But all my work, you can go to aaronjudkins.com, go to my Substack account where I write articles and on these subjects, and you'll get you can sign up for a free account or for a membership account. You'll be able to get access to other content there. That's at aaronjudkins.substack.com. Just go to Substack and then type in my name, or go to my Patreon site, which is called Ancient Pathways. And we have a lot of free content for you there for digital download. And for membership, we have content that's available exclusively for members only. But you'll find a lot of my material that I've amassed over the decades at the Patreon site. You'll find digital downloads of volumes of libraries of ancient books and things that I have just had in my personal library that is available for you, for members to download and have at your disposal. So I've got a lot of research that I put into these things, and it's just been an adventure to be able to go and around the world, Peru, Bolivia, Turkey, Egypt, and many other places that I've been to go, not only in search of Noah's Ark, but in search of other mysteries of the past. It's really been a pleasure and an honor. But I like taking the information, and I don't try to convince anybody of these things. I want to present the evidence and present them to you so you can make up your own mind. And that's kind of where I think I'm different, is that let's put it up for discussion. And even though we don't have hard data yet for Noah's Ark, I think that data is going to be coming soon. And when it does, you'll have to consider the evidence and weigh the preponderance of evidence in your own mind and see if these things hold true. And just like what Peter tells us in the scripture, is don't believe my word for it. I want you to search it out for yourself and discover these truths for yourself and see if they actually are true indeed. And that's the beauty of archaeology, is to be able to take these pieces of the past and put them together and see what context, what story they're telling us. And a lot of the stories are actually confirming the narrative of the Bible.
I've got a feeling this will not be your only appearance on this show. But for now, Aaron, thank you so much for coming on Things Visible and Invisible.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us on another episode of Things Visible and Invisible. We're dedicated to uncovering phenomena that challenge our understanding of reality, from ancient enigmas and paranormal encounters to scientific anomalies and forgotten histories. If you enjoyed this journey into the mysterious and unexplained, please consider subscribing to our channel and hitting the notification bell to stay updated on future explorations. Have a personal experience or story that aligns with our investigations? We'd love to hear from you. Visit our website at tvi.show and reach out through our contact form. While we can't feature every submission, we review them all, and your story might be featured in an upcoming episode. To support our continued investigations, please consider becoming a Patreon supporter or channel member. Your contributions make these explorations possible and give you access to exclusive content, early releases, and monthly behind-the-scenes discussions with our team. Don't forget to check out our merch store. We've got everything from TVI branded t-shirts and hoodies to stickers and coffee mugs, perfect for showing your support while keeping the mysteries close. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time as we continue to explore the things visible and invisible.